Well, that moves us on to the last part of the formal meeting. And it's a pleasure to introduce a lecture from Jane Ryder. And I would just note that, as is the custom at these anniversary meetings, there will be no questions at the end of Jane's address. We were very fortunate on Council to have Jane's services as one of us until she felt that she had to step down given her new role as first chair of HES. She was a great support on Council and very instrumental in helping us streamline our work and create the new structure, which I think is bedding down so well. Jane has had a varied career, including a practice in maritime law and specialising in regulation and organisational development. She has a long record within the cultural sector, and previous roles include 8 years as Chief Executive of the Scottish Museums Council, where she developed the first national strategy for Scotland's museums and was one of the original board members of SCRAN. She was also the first Chief Executive of Oscar, successfully establishing the new regulatory regime for charities in Scotland. She is an experienced non-executive as a former chair of the Scottish Refugee Council and vice chair of Stevenson College. And in March 2015, she steps down as deputy chair of the Seafish Industry Authority and as chair of Arts and Business Scotland. She's a board member of the Marine Management Organisation. In January 2015, she was appointed as one of the first board members of Revenue Scotland, the new tax authority. And now, in amongst all of that, she's taking over the challenging and interesting job as chair of Historic Environment Scotland. And I cannot imagine that there's anybody more fit or able to do that. And look forward to hearing what she has to say about her new role. So, Jane, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, David, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you this afternoon as an antiquary and as the chair of Historic Environment Scotland. And my title, as you see, is Protecting the Past, Shaping the Future. It seems very appropriate that I should be doing that at this anniversary meeting of the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland, a society which dates back to 1780 and has played such an important part in preserving our heritage, including our collective and corporate memory. It's almost exactly a year since the Historic Environment Scotland Act 2014 received royal assent, the 9th of December, which created Historic Environment Scotland. The board was appointed in January the 27th. I know this because it was my birthday. It was no coincidence, but it just so happened. So memorable date. But we only assumed our full statutory responsibilities a few weeks ago on the 1st of October. And in terms of protecting our intangible past, this audience will be acutely aware that we inherit the legacy of two outstanding organisations with such a long history in investigating, caring for and celebrating the historic environment in Scotland. The Royal Commission, established by a Royal Charter in 1908, I think that's oh, can I use this? I've always wanted to use one of these. That's the Charter. Calaverock, the fine collection of drawings and plans, and the aerial photography, the most important collection of aerial photographs. And then also Historic Scotland, the latest actor, I've called it, in demonstrating state interest in important historic buildings, sites and monuments in state or third-party ownership. I didn't know this, perhaps you did. The very first was taken into care in 1853, that's Lynn Lithgow, and the latest, 2006, Ardclach, near Nairn. And the functions of both Arkhams and Historic Scotland are enshrined and so protected in policy intent and in our founding legislation. And yet, while of course we'll build on the inherited legacy, Historic Environment Scotland must and will deliver in new and different ways. We're compelled to do so by government, by the sector, by the need to adapt and change to meet the shifting challenges, pressures and opportunities that environmental, social, cultural, technological, economic circumstances present. So how we fulfill the inherited functions will change. And in many ways, I mean, that's not at all surprising. Technology has always changed the way the functions have delivered over the years, from the very earliest, and I'm sure there are some even earlier examples of photography developing now aerial photography and indeed drones, the use of drones. The portfolio of ownership or guardianship of the state has expanded over 200 years, as I say, between 1853 through to 2006. We continue to build on the commitment, knowledge and expertise of everyone who's worked so hard and for so long to help protect and celebrate Scotland's historic environment. But the challenge for us all is to consider how we can change it for the better, how we can make 1 and 1 equal not just 2, but 3 or 5. Indeed, it might be said there was otherwise little point in bringing the two organisations together. Some of the changes are immediately obvious. First of all, Historic Environment Scotland has been established as a non-departmental public body, and like Scotland's other national cultural institutions with the same status, the national museums, the national galleries, national libraries, the botanics, we're also now a registered Scottish charity recognised by Oscar. Like other NDPBs, our relationship to government is now more arm's length and transparent, which I believe will be a long-term benefit. But for the present, it certainly is a marked change, particularly for those who are used to working in and with Historic Scotland as a formal part of government, and that brings its own interesting challenges. In terms of responsibilities, the most obvious is that as of the 1st of October, Historic Environment Scotland has an obligation to manage, conserve and monitor the 335 historic properties in our care and their associated collections under formal schemes of delegation from Scottish ministers. And it's worth noting that 74 of these are owned by the state, but the vast majority are actually in ownership of third parties, not the state. But under the scheme of delegation, we have that responsibility for looking after all of those properties. A great deal of excellent work has been undertaken over the last few months to identify the sites. I mean, that in itself, we thought we had 345, but actually the review and the reclassification decided 335. Fully assess the state of repair and what might be needed for the future. The schemes of delegation are published online, and for the first time, there's a transparent process for reporting on the properties and the associated collections. And the development of the schemes has given us the impetus and the focus to look at the whole approach to management of the properties in care. It will lead to improved systems for inspection and recording the condition of the properties, more formal technical standards, and external peer review. I think a really important development, external peer review of our work in this area to aim to improve the protection of the properties and their associated collections. And in managing the properties, it means, as you know, that Historic Environment Scotland is one of the largest operators of visitor attractions in Scotland, with an extraordinary range in terms of size and scale. Everything from 1.5 million visitors a year to Edinburgh Castle to standing stones in Dumfries and Galloway, Orkney, Shetland. Only 79 of the 335 monuments are staffed, and only 75 charge admission at the site, although, of course, we have the very valuable membership scheme. Meanwhile, we now have the stewardship of the former Arkhams collections. It's no secret that the storage and suitable access to these collections has been an issue of long-term concern, and it's an immediate issue currently facing the board. It opens up possibilities of different approaches and collaborations, starting with the use of properties in care, but other possibilities such as touring exhibitions or collaborations, not just, for example, with the National Museums or the National Galleries, but outside Edinburgh, including, for example, the V&A in Dundee. There's no doubt that the challenges attendant on those responsibilities for stewardship are familiar to many other organisations, including number in the audience. But Historic Scotland, Environment Scotland is a very complex beast. I overheard somebody describe it as the quango of all quangos. Not sure if that's quite right, but it's certainly complex, and we certainly have a range of other responsibilities and expectations set out in legislation and in the expectations of government for NDPBs and for Historic Environment Scotland in particular. First of all, we've got an important regulatory role, and that's unusual for a charity. The Act introduced changes to processes for the designation of sites and buildings by scheduling and listing, and for scheduled monuments, listed buildings and conservation area consent. To that end, our new heritage management portal, launched on the 1st of October, will publish all our decisions on scheduling, listing and consents, and everybody will be able to see how we go about our regulatory business, much improving the transparency of our decision-making processes. And that brings us into line with planning authorities across Scotland who already publish their decisions. And in addition, our decisions can also be challenged under the new right of appeal to ministers, and indeed ministers can call in some decisions. So there's a distinction between us as first-line decision makers and ministers, and I think that that's really very helpful and very valuable. We're also a significant grant giver. Indeed, some 14.5 million, or approximately 1/3 of our grant and aid from Scottish Government, is restricted funds, specifically ring-fenced to be given to third parties, not used for our own projects. We're currently undertaking a review of the grant schemes to ensure we adopt best practice, and for example, that we're capturing and making best use of the lessons and good practice of those undertaking the projects for the benefit of the sector as a whole. It reminds me very much of when the Heritage Lottery Fund first started off, and about how the grant schemes developed and how the dissemination of information and advice developed. And I think there's some lessons to be learnt for that. But some of the biggest changes are to the policy landscape in which we operate and the policy intentions and expectations which government have set out. You'll be very familiar, and indeed the Society played an active role in creating the Historic Environment Strategy, and in creating Historic Environment Scotland as an organisation. The Scottish Government has made it clear that we're to act as the lead body for the historic environment and will be integral to the delivery of our place in time, the first strategy. That's a new role for a new era, and naturally we've been giving considerable thought to what it means to be the lead body in this context. The Act and the policy memorandum for the Act make reference to being collaborative and to working partnership, and there's no doubt we can't meet the challenges we all face by operating alone, and in isolation. Collaboration and partnership working will be key. But we think there's more to being the lead body than that, and we've been developing our thinking over the last few months, and as I hope you know, we, like Society, we launched our draft corporate plan on the 16th of November for public consultation. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, share some of that thinking with you, and alert you to the fact that we too are looking for responses to the consultation, and this is where you can respond. Some of you may have heard this already, because we've had two very interesting events over the last few weeks since we launched. Firstly, a conference in Dundee to celebrate the anniversary of the publication of the strategy, Our Place in Time. That included a terrific presentation from Jeff on DLitt, an excellent example of collaborative leadership and real revving up the audience, where I also shared some of our thoughts on leadership, and that was explored further last week when we had an excellent consultation event focusing on our corporate plan, where the board members facilitated round table discussions. As well as enormously valuable practical comments and suggestions, some of the most stimulating debate was around the concept of leadership, what it means, who can and should be exercising this, and although some people want us to be ambitious, it's perfectly fair to say that others have reservations, and certainly have reservations if it were the traditional paternalistic pattern of leadership. So what does leadership look like? And for us, firstly, it means that Historic Environment Scotland will lead through enabling and facilitating others to play their role, including delivering on the strategy. In doing so, it means we will be valuing and respecting the role and expertise of others. It means acting as a catalyst to make things happen. It means leading in partnership with and on behalf of the sector nationally and internationally. There was a lot of support, it must be said, at that event last week for promoting of the international value of Scotland's heritage, promoting it, celebrating. What it doesn't mean is that we're going to dominate the sector and lead it in our interests, and that paternalistic model. If you're a student of leadership or management theory, I suggest the important concept is one of servant leadership, promoting and enabling others to flourish. And that's why we've made lead and enable an overarching or umbrella theme for the plan. It's also why we've specifically included as a key indicator or measure of success, this is, as I remember, performance indicator number 4, creating an organisation that earns respect as the lead body for the historic environment, because leadership, to my mind, is earned. It's not simply awarded by designation or intention. Secondly, it means leading by example in every area in which we engage. Of course, in widening meaningful access to and participation in the historic environment, both physical and virtual, but also acting as an exemplary regulator, as a grant giver, and as a high-performing organisation delivering high-quality public services, and as a charity living up to our charitable purposes. Last week's event provided some really interesting examples and expectations of how we might do this, some reinforcing current good practice, some putting a different emphasis on possibilities, including the advocacy influencing role, and that links to another of the key measures of success in the plan, which is taking the staff on the transformation journey. There are challenges, of course, but there's some really exciting possibilities for our current staff and I think for other organisations, because I think being an NDPB rather than, as Historic Scotland was, the civil service, there's much more possibility of secondments, rotations, exchanges, shadowing, much more of actually sharing our experience. And thirdly, it also means being clear in terms of our vision, our mission, and the core values that will guide our behaviour and our actions. We've thought a lot about these. We want to test them out widely as they underpin all that we do and all that's expected of us. Our vision is that Scotland's heritage is cherished, understood, shared and enjoyed with pride by everyone. Our mission, that was difficult to frame our very complex responsibilities in a single sentence. So we've addressed it as these 3 bullet points: to enhance knowledge and understanding, to protect and conserve it, to share and celebrate. We've also been thinking in detail about our values, because values drive behaviours and actions. They go to the heart of how you do things. And really, how you do things is as important as what things we do. And in governance terms, that's really important to me as the chair, because stewardship is one of the key responsibilities of the board. And that includes not just the physical assets in terms of the properties and the collections, but also the stewardship of our values. And so during the consultation, I'm really particularly interested in feedback on the values that we've identified, which are, as you see, collaborative, professional, of course, innovative, we are forward-looking and creative, embracing change, open, transparent, and respectful. I'll be honest, and I'm not sure that this formulation of respectful is exactly right, and that was a discussion we had last week. It's a bit utilitarian, and I think actually for me respectful is much more about the value we place on others for their own objectives, and even when, or perhaps especially when people disagree, rather than being utilitarian, but I'm interested in feedback on that. The draft plans also sets out, as you would expect, outcomes, objectives and measures. It's clustered into 5 groups, and to go back, as I say, lead and enable is overarching. Understand, protect and value are very much aligned with the strategy, and perform is exactly what you would expect. You need the infrastructure and the underpinning. So we think, and you hope you would expect that the corporate plan is easy to read. We've certainly slimmed it down. I think we've got it to, I can't actually remember how many pages, but it wasn't 60. I mean, I did say I do not want a 60-page thing, and I do want, we've only got 11 KPIs, and anybody who's familiar with the combined KPIs of the previous 2 organisations will know that that's a true decimation. So we think there's a logic to it and the associated values, but the public consultation is live. It'll run up to the week of the 8th of February, so we very much welcome the chance to discuss and hear your comments over the next few weeks. So as I've outlined, it's aligned to the current historic environment strategy, and that should give us all a direction. But as yet, I can't say that's looking very far into the future. Indeed, our plan is only a 3-year plan because it fits to a funding cycle. In the context of a society that's been in existence for as long as this society has, it seems right to be asking, well, what about the long term? If you turn corporate planning or horizon scanning on its head, those of you a certain age can think of it as back to the future, but we've actually just passed the 21st of October 2015. It used to be horizon scanning took us to 2020, but my goodness, that seems uncomfortably close. And I note the Society's strategic plan is going past that, to 2021. So perhaps instead, let's say 2050, or even 2080, the 300th anniversary of the Society. Looking back then, what is it we want to have achieved, and what is it we need to be thinking about now in order to deliver that long-term vision and shape the future? I want Historic Environment Scotland to be flourishing and well respected, but I don't for a moment expect that what we see now will remain the same as we collectively address longer term issues. What will the portfolio of properties in ownership or guardianship of the state look like? Will Historic Environment Scotland be responsible for them all, or will there be, for example, more local management? How will this be funded? What will the regulatory system look like? How have we collectively responded to the challenges of climate change? I am starting a mission to make Canute, the patron saint of Historic Environment Scotland, a fine regulator and a man who really appreciated climate change, much misunderstood. How will we collectively, and Historic Environment Scotland particularly, have played our part in encouraging good modern architecture, which will be the heritage environment of the future? This is a wonderful image for us. This is the old, under construction, now a World Heritage status, the modern, the current, but also what is now being built. And those are the things we need to think about as an organisation and as a society. These are just some of the questions we need to address, and they're not just for Historic Environment Scotland, but they're for everyone who cares about the historic environment, past, present, future. I hope and intend that both Historic Environment Scotland and the Society will be playing an active and positive role in the longer-term debate, and I look forward to exploring those ideas with all of you over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane, for that splendid account of HES's ambitions and the way ahead. That's the formal part of the meeting over. I hope all of you will stay for our drinks reception. It's upstairs, isn't it? It's through the door at the back there, is it? Yeah. Yeah. And if I can remind the new fellows that I very much like to see all of you and be able to congratulate you before you leave tonight. So thank you very much indeed for your support, and look forward to speaking to you all in the year ahead. Thank you.